children are the hope of the future. Even your family can betray you. Inheritance must be abolished. It's just an accident that your parents are your parents. Much was decided before you were born. Planning for the future is escapism. The family is living in borrowed time. You can live on through your descendants. Probably this last sentence by Jenny Holzer Truisms from 1977 is the one that sticks better to today's subject, the delicate transition of passing your gallery on to family members. I had to do some research in order to prepare this roundtable, and basically all the information I came from were from art dealers and Kunsthandlers in the 20th century, like the Rosenbergs. Paul and Leonce Rosenberg became the dealers of the Cubists, already a second generation of dealers, and were the exclusive dealers of Picasso, Braque, Leger, and Matisse. Alexander Rosenberg, their son, was the founder of Art Dealers Association of America, ADAA, and other archives are now part of MoMA. Another of these mythic sagas are the Wildensteins. Daniel Wildenstein was already the third generation of dealers, was the director of the Museum Jacques-André in Paris, and he published the Catalogue Raisonnaise of Manet, Monet, and Courbet. The Wildenstein family are still part of Pace Wildenstein. And another of these sagas are the Namads, reputed by Christopher Berg, honorary chairman of Christie's, to have sold more works of art than anybody alive, excluding auctioneers. Probably the second biggest holding of Picasso works after the Picasso family, and whose now they still have two galleries. But I think these sagas of art dealers is probably easier for art dealers and not so easy for galleries like you are now in talking galleries that represent living artists, and where trust is so important, the trust to the artists, the trust to collectors, and where the personal name, the personal value adds, the personal name adds value to the art list of artists we represent. So we're going to analyze how this trespassing from one gallery to a generation passes to another with three persons that we've already introduced. David Juda. Thank you, David. You joined the gallery in 1967, your mother's gallery, Anneli Juda, and you're representing people like Christo, David Hockney, Leon Kosov, Eduardo Chillida, and Anthony Carey. Your gallery also represented Russian constructivism, the steel, and you're also chairman, or you're also an active member of the London Society of Art Dealers, for 40 years, and you've been chaired for between 2014 and 2017. Thank you for being here. Alex Logsdail is we know everything about Lisson Gallery now, but is the international director of New York-based Lisson Gallery, opened in 2016. You had worked previously in other galleries, stage projects, and team. And the third of our guests is Guillermo Parra Romero, who studied art history in Christie's and also worked in different galleries in London, White Cube and Victoria Miro, before taking over your family's gallery in Madrid. So besides these cases, I see among the public lots of people, or some other cases of second generation of galleries, Nerea Fernandez, I see Patricia de Muga over there. Of course, it's Ursula Kritzinger and Thomas that we were talking about that before. So please feel free to join in the conversation. And I will ask, I'll start asking you one question to the three of you, the same one, and then we'll do different questions. So the first question for each one of you is, how was the transition in your gallery? How did it happen? How was it announced? How was it, David?
I started with my mother in '67, as you mentioned. I became a partner in 1982, and then my mother and her lawyer decided in '88 that I would take over the gallery totally from a business point of view, financial point of view, although this was not made public in any way because it was really my mother who was the main person in the gallery. But it helped in the transition for tax reasons and so on, that when my mother passed away, there was no complications and it all went very smoothly. I think the question, how did the transition go? I think it went very naturally and very smoothly, in a way to do with age, to do with energy, etc. And I was very fortunate in having a mother who basically let me do what I wanted to a certain extent.
Guillermo? Well, my case was a little special because my parents had the gallery. It was quite different. And I was in London and I was learning a little bit about how to build up actually my own gallery. So I remember we had a conversation because they wanted to, or they believed in what I wanted to do, and they asked me to take it and do it. So the gallery of my parents was completely different, was totally different kind of say religion, and it was a very slow process to change everything at the end because I have to also convince them during the process about what I wanted to do. And then it's very interesting because a few years ago we are very close family at the end, and we were revising photographs from when we were like 10 years ago maybe, or 15 years ago, and looking at photographs with the family, I realized that my parents are now younger than before when I started the gallery. And for me it was probably the best gift because I injected very well the poison that I wanted to do at the end of the gallery. So the transition was very nice, it was very hard as well, and then they became my employees, so which is very interesting as well. And it's a very specific and different case because I didn't really continue. It was the base of the gallery, but at the end it was a new project. And my father, for example, is a former architect, and he's taking care of all the productions and logistics and everything. He's fantastic for that. And my mother, it's very good with accounts, so she's the accountant. And we have now obviously more people helping us to develop those fields, but yeah, but it was like very easy at the end.
Alex, how was your case?
I think I'm in a slightly different position than you two in that Nicholas and I still do a lot of things together, and we really work very closely together on the artists that we choose to work with, the program, the general running of the gallery. So it's not. I guess we're still in a transition phase rather than having completed a transition phase. I moved to New York when I was 19. I didn't know anyone. I knew one person, and I interned at Art Forum, and I worked at a couple of galleries. And previous to that, I had really no interest in being in the art world at all. I kind of had an allergic reaction having grown up around it. And I was going to be a musician, and that didn't really work out. After being in New York for 4-ish years, I had a medical issue, so I had to go back to the UK, and then I stayed for a while, 3.5 years, and then I moved back to New York in order to open up the gallery there, and we had a little office, and then a few years ago we started building the actual space, and that's really where the transition fully began in earnest.
Great. How was in the case? I don't know about you, David, but Guillermo and Alex have worked in other galleries before joining your family gallery. How was that experience? What did you took from those galleries? Did that help? How useful was it?
I found it very useful. I found that they couldn't, every single gallery was very, very different. I worked at 2 galleries and a project space in New York. Every single one of them was radically different. And the way that Lisson runs is also radically different. I think it has so much to do with the personality of the owner or founder, who's kind of set the pace for how things operate, but also the ethos of the artists that you choose to show. It just creates radically different environments, and you can't. I don't think there's a blueprint to say, how one works or another does.
Well, in my case, it was essential because I learned many of the things that I was actually introducing in the gallery in Madrid. I think it's very healthy to see what the others do, and in my case, I realized a different world. So it was extremely positive, and it's still very positive in my daily experience. So.
David, in your case, what was, because you already started working with your mother? Huh?
Well, I didn't work in any other gallery. I think my first bit of education in the gallery world was probably in 1960 to 64, when my mother had her first gallery, and I was allowed to serve the drinks. And I was taught that you fill the glass half full for the artist, 3/4 full for the collector, and the whiskey bottle for a museum director from under the table. That was the first thing I learned. And then I decided that I would have a better career perhaps in the Merchant Navy, and I became a waiter on a luxury liner, and that's how I used to come to Barcelona quite often. When my mother's second gallery closed because the backers didn't want to support it, that's when I joined my mother. And I really didn't know anything about art, apart from going to exhibitions with my mother and things. And so I learned it all from the beginning.
How is the relation with the artist different between, the artist relating to your mother or to you? How was it when you entered the gallery? They wanted to talk to you or not, or the...
I think with the artists it was great.
Okay.
I think the artists enjoyed me going around with my mother, and I was learning all the time. I would get very upset when collectors would come in, and I would say, "Can I help you?" And they'd say, "No, we want to speak to Annalie." And I said, "Well, I'm David." They said, "You're not Annalie." And it took me quite a while to get used to that.
And you, Alex? Same thing happened, or not really?
To a degree, yeah, of course, absolutely. But I think I think one of the things that I feel was crucial about having worked at other places is that you earn your own identity, which I think is I found very, very important. That I would come into this very well-established business with a long history and a large number of staff, with a degree of my own credibility from the outside world, and that was very important in establishing good relationships with collectors and respect from the artists that I have developed good relationships with over the years as well. So, yeah, I think it's always a challenge because you're trying to latch onto existing relationships, but you have to make them your own as well.
What perceivable changes were made in the galleries when you entered? In your case, was a completely different gallery, or?
It was 100% new. Yes, completely different. And but in my case, was a nice process, but it was very slow. I realized after a few years that it would be easier in that at the beginning to me. I mean, to open a completely new gallery on my own. Because at the end we were 3 taking decisions, so then we had to really sit down and decide. I mean, at the end, I was the person who were taking the decisions about the program and a few other things. So then we separate. I used the knowledge I learned from these two big galleries, and how to divide the business, which is very important. And for example, Lisson Gallery, just to realize how many people, for example, work in the gallery, how many divisions you have inside, or things like this. When I started the gallery, I mean, when I was studying, basically, I didn't know anything about this. So thanks to that experience, I was able to basically administrate the information that we were handling in a better way, as well as financially. We were, trying to not make a lot of mistakes with the program and everything, especially in the context of a gallery in Madrid where the visibility is very reduced. To build up a gallery with a little resonance in outside of or globally is really, really difficult. So that's why I also decided to open recently a gallery in Ibiza, because I wanted to use what we already have in our country, and it's a place that is basically quite international. Even there's more reasons about it, but it was for me really, really hard at the beginning, to be honest.
And for you, David, do you introduce some changes, new artists, or encourage to go to other art fairs, or did you?
I think the gallery has changed, evolved over the years, but I was fortunate that my mother worked until she was 90 in the gallery until 2004, and so and I had started a long time earlier, so we sort of had moved in the same direction. I brought in a few new artists, but a lot of the artists that were showing when my mother was alive had also come from me. I think probably 1989-90 was the sort of major point of transition, and perhaps a little bit like you, we decided we didn't open another gallery, but we moved from a warehouse space. Incidentally, we ideally wanted to open a space in 67 next door to your gallery, but we unfortunately weren't able to do it. So we moved from a warehouse space in Tottenham Mews to Dering Street, where we are now. And I sort of organized all that, and I sort of then felt really that I was becoming more of running the gallery, and it all went really very, very naturally, I think is the best way to describe it, and there were no real problems. And I think the artists, there was certain artists that my mother was more fond of than I was, or vice versa, but it was never a problem.
Some sorts of galleries open their own gallery. We have a KOW in Berlin, is run by the sons of Rosemary Schwarzfelder, next one is Stefan in Vienna, Francesca Minini, of course, the daughter of Massimo Minini. Claes Nordenhacker's son has his own gallery. You never thought of opening your own gallery? Once the music didn't work out?
I did, but I planned to do something in New York, which was made impossible. Like I said, I had a medical issue, which meant I had no health insurance at the time, so I was forced to move back to the UK. But I also felt, actually, opening I felt it was very, very difficult time to open a young gallery in London, and I wasn't able to do it in New York at the time. So it just sort of organically happened. I didn't feel that I could open a gallery in London in the same kind of territory as Nicholas. I felt it would have been difficult.
Okay. What is the difference between taking over a gallery from a son or relatives and when it's one of the partners in the gallery that continues? Suddenly after a name appears in the name of the gallery, a second name, and then the other person retires. What happens when there's a blood link there, family issues? Are the differences? Is it easier, less?
as I said before, I mean, for me, we had a lot of discussions about this. So it was at the end not really difficult, but I kept. So the name of my gallery's parents were Pilar Parra, which probably nobody knows. And then I decided to put my second surname. In fact, I'm not Guillermo Parra. I'm Romero Parra, and I twisted the gallery, so I twisted the name as well of the gallery. So the gallery is Parra Romero. This is a little pleasure that I wanted to do, and it's keeping the two, obviously, because we are a family business, but to keeping the two surnames, but I twisted. And even, for example, my parents, they've been always very generous to me, and they said you should have your own name. But of course, I wanted to carry on the whole process, obviously making a tribute to them as well. So I don't remember exactly the question.
No, compared to the galleries that it's a partner of or director of the gallery that takes over the continuity of the gallery, compared to someone when it's taken over by someone by the same family or son or daughter. If are there differences, or is it easier because you're already relatives and you have lunch on Sundays together? I don't know.
I think
it helps or not.
It brings its. There are pros and cons to both situations, and I think in the family situation, in theory, you share a sensibility, you share an aesthetic sense, you share a kind of a set of values or morals, and so there's an ease at which things can be fluid. That said, there's always the kind of charge of nepotism, which is very hard to escape, impossible, in fact. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but it can be done, I think.
Yeah. It's also, I think, very nice because, for example, I experienced that I live in front of the gallery, my parents live behind of the gallery. When I moved to Ibiza, I was going to have my own thing and have my house, everything. My parents bought a house 2 years ago. So on Sundays, I have my kids, and I have a brother who is an architect, and it's not related to the gallery. I think there's a question afterwards about this. But my brother is already doing things in Ibiza and Madrid next to me and close at the end. On Sundays, we have always lunch together. We always talk about the gallery. So at the end, we cannot really escape, and this is also very nice because it's absolutely and I don't remember actually discussions about all the things more than the gallery with my parents, in fact. So, but I think at the end it's also very nice. So in my case, I really like it. And I hope my kids, even I don't want to make any pressure because they're too young, but I will really like that they also.
That was my last question. That's a spoiler, but
I'm sorry.
I've only worked in a gallery. I worked with Helga Albert, who took over Juana Mordó. And regarding the inventory, there were pieces that were from the former gallery, Helga's artists. In a two-generation gallery, having pieces in your inventory from previous generation, does that help or not? How do you consider it positive, or sometimes it's David?
I don't think it's a big problem because I think all galleries have, although they don't discuss it that often, they have inventory that they don't want to know about, and I think everybody has a sort of a section, and I think it's the same between two generations really, and I think the whole thing of coming back to working together. I think it's actually much easier if it's family because the son can't take the mother or father to the employments tribunal, and the mother or father can't sack you very easily. So it's much easier.
But I think that sort of having the old inventory or things like that is. It depends whether it's a burden or a blessing. It depends whether it's pleasurable or something you really feel obligated to do and you really don't enjoy. There's always a mix.
But there's always a mix anyway.
Always,
always
yeah,
a mix.
there's always a mix no matter what.
In my case, there was also a mix. There were jewels, and there were some things that probably were not that updated. But I was wanted to probably, if it's family, it's an easier relationship, as you say.
Well, I would like to say something about this because in my family inventory help us in some cases to carry on other things, and this is I think important. So I remember Yvonne Lambert used to say that it's more important what you keep, not what you sell from your exhibitions. So I'm trying to, or even today is more difficult than probably like 20 or 30 years ago. But I think it's very important to create your own archive, and if you, because sometimes when situations are not really good, you can use it.
Yeah, sure. Does a new generation in the gallery implies technological innovation or promotion or sales or technology? How do you, that you're the youngest, Alex and Guillermo, younger than David and I. You, so how do you feel about
Yeah, well,
it?
I
And we were
think
talking
it was
about
very,
that this morning, yeah.
this morning. I think it's very interesting. In my case, I was talking about before about the visibility. I mean, having a gallery in Spain is very difficult because you don't get the visibilities from other cities that people go more, I mean, often. So instead of, I mean, in my own domestic economy, instead of investing a lot of money in doing advertisement in magazines or, you know, or getting like a presence in media, so I decided to run the risk to open the gallery in a place that also outside of Madrid, which is having a lot of attention. So in my case, I of course I'm dedicated a lot of time to think about how to communicate for my generation and the generation behind, which I think is probably something to really think about today. But I'm really dedicating also my time or time of the gallery to have a visibility in a different way. And I think in my case, to be peripheric is also interesting, and so trying to make a more potential the situation because of that.
I agree. I think that I feel that the use of technology with your website or your social media feed or whatever it might be is at the moment most useful for visibility. I don't see that I think it's going to take a very long time for the art world to fully embrace online sales and anything that really kind of generates a large level of income. I think it's really a promotional tool. It's a way of getting people educated about the gallery, educated about your artists, about things that you want people to read about. I'm not sure that it's at the point where it's useful for much more than that yet.
Yeah, me too. I think so far that's the point. But on the other hand, we need it, and I want to know your approach to that. Did the renovation in this generation of galleries brought a new public a new audience to the gallery? In your case, David, or
Sorry?
Did this your enrollment in the gallery brought a new public, a younger crowd to your generation of collectors or younger public to the gallery compared to your mother's? Or
Well, I think probably in my case, because I've been around relatively long, it's already the role of my colleagues in the gallery, and it's my colleagues that are really going forward for the younger collectors and really in a way bringing a transition to the gallery past what I have done with my mother, and they're doing it now because I think my my knowledge of all the technologies are so limited. I still talk about a calculator being a computer, but so that I have to really rely on my colleagues who really are pushing very hard on this and very successfully. I do think it is more the future than we wish.
I think that since I started working at the gallery, there has been a change in audience. I don't know how much I can attribute to me. I think it's attributable to an evolving program. We've taken on a large number of artists in the last 10 years. We do more art fairs. We have spaces. We have space in New York now, which we didn't before. I think it's a function of that. We reach a different group of people than we reached before. So that it's very hard to know exactly what to attribute it to. But I think whenever you bring a new artist into the gallery, it always brings a new demographic with them, and it brings a new audience.
Thank you. I was thinking, compared to gastronomy, probably in gastronomy, everybody would select two-generation restaurant rather than a brand that has 10 restaurants all around the world. No, what are the advantages of a two-generation gallery together compared to a multi-branded global gallery?
I really don't know. I learned a lot, and I didn't have to go into the deep end straight away. I think that was a great advantage for me. The disadvantage is to be recognized for yourself and to feel that you've actually, and I think that only comes not from other people recognizing you, but you recognizing inside yourself that you actually have achieved something. Once that happened to me, I was much more confident.
Guillermo, what can you say as an asset of two-generation gallery?
Well, in Asia, third generation is a dynasty, right? So so it depends on, yeah. So at the end, I mean, it's more basic. I think it's about what you have. Your program is the value of. In the case of them, I mean, it's an extremely huge value. I mean, because they had already amazing galleries with an extraordinary program, and at the end is what it stays, right? I mean, and basically, what really built up an identity is that. So probably in a restaurant, they value also the tradition of that identity, and I think in our case also it's almost the same.
The only major benefit that I can think of is that you have history behind you, and you have the ability to continue that history for longer than one lifetime, which is that's something that I think is very valuable, and it's impossible to replicate. But again, it comes with its complications. But it does allow you to kind of continue a lineage that would otherwise just end.
I think there's one thing to add is that I think in my case and probably your case, and yours too, we have been around and seen situations. Ursula Krinziger mentioned it earlier on this morning. So we've seen bad times and we've seen good times, and we're perhaps not overstretched of what's going on at the moment. And I think, I know in the case of Nicholas and also in the case of my mother and myself that we had struggles, and it's good to remember them. Sure. Because we may go back to them.
I quite agree. Having memory is very important for business. Right now, we were talking with David before about Soledad Lorenzo and about her, her quitting the gallery and donating her whole collection to the Reina Sofia. There's an exhibition right now at the Reina Sofia of the pieces she donated to the Reina Sofia. Helga de Alvear with her work, she's expanding her museum in Cáceres in order to donate her collection. And even Juana de Izpuru's collection can be seen now in Valladolid. Do you have a collection, a gallery collection, family collection that you would like to be preserved or be part of a museum or be a museum in itself?
Meaning how it's going to go on?
No, yeah, that was the second question, but if you have like your own personal collection of works that belong to you that you like to pass to an institution or to be part of a museum or be exhibited as a, the Annelie and David Juda collection?
I don't have... there's a gallery collection. I have a personal collection, which is not a collection like a collector's collector. It's something that sort of formed over many years. And I feel I don't actually want it to go anywhere. I want it to be sold and given to a charity and to actually do some good.
That's a very noble thought.
I think that generally speaking, gallerists, rather than strict sort of art dealers, collections are they grow organically. They grow in weird ways, unpredictably. You end up with things that you maybe had to buy back, or you I don't know, sale got cancelled, or what. They things just kind of come together, and it's not necessarily built in the same way that a collector would build a collection. So it's hard to it's hard to identify what it really is, even. I don't know.
In my case, my parents have their own collection, and I'm trying to do my own collection, and I think it's probably the best business we can do is keep things for us. So at the end, and so it's a passion as well. It's more than a job. It's a way of life. That's probably most of you think about. And for me, it's sometimes very hard to see go pieces that I really like. So I always try to buy from the gallery and keep many as possible. So I don't know if in the future we'll be exhibited in a museum. I doubt it, but I really enjoy to build up a collection. In my case, also to hopefully my kids will continue. So I now have a second motivation, which is also do it for them.
Well, you already mentioned that you would like your kids to take over the gallery, but we were talking with David before. What happens if you don't have family, or what happens to a dynasty of galleries, or to a gallery when there's no future generation? That was something that you pointed out, and I think that's something interesting discussing. What happens with a gallery when there are no heirs or directors that will take over? How do you manage all that?
I think, as we're talking about legacy, the legacy is also what's going to happen after we're gone. And if you have family, yes, maybe, but maybe not. There's not that many third and fourth generation gallerists, and it could well be that your children would love to do it, perhaps not. I don't have any children, and it's a subject that has worried me for quite a long time, because it's not. I don't have the feeling that I want Annelie Juda Fine Art to exist forever, but there's a lot in the gallery that I would like that it continues, and I don't mind if it goes in a different direction to a certain extent. But I don't know the answer is really the problem. And in an ideal world, you'd like somebody to come in and you slowly, in a way, have a transitional situation, exactly the same as family, but it doesn't seem to work like that. I suppose either galleries get, if there's no family, they get either sold or somebody buys it or they close. which I think is a great pity because there's a lot of experience that goes down the drain with that. But to find somebody who wants to come in and slowly buy out the gallery, and it's not a question of money, it's a question of finding somebody who's got the energy, who's got the will to do it. And, you know, like, even, you know, you ask your colleagues, your staff, who are really dedicated and have worked with you on for many, many years, they don't want to take on the risk and responsibility, which are pretty big these days.
Yeah. Well, I was mentioning Paul Rosenberg before, and Paul Rosenberg, the Rosenberg's archive is now part of MoMA. Do you think these important galleries archives should be kept all together or should be kept in an institution? I know the German Gallery Association made an archive for galleries, archives run by Rudolf Wirner for a while. How do you think these gallery archives should be handled? Because it's a very important part of art history.
I think the answer, yes, it's very nice, but we mustn't forget there's an awful lot of archives. The Tate has been given continually artists' archives, and they don't want them because they can't find people to look after them and to translate them into an archival situation. And although I don't want to discount archives, far from it, I think that we've got to be careful that we don't over-validate it. You know, the art is what's important. And perhaps I made a wrong comment just now when I said I wanted to give my collection to charity. What I was actually trying to say was that there's so much art around that my art collection isn't important enough to have to go somewhere and to be archival, etc., etc. You know, it could go and be sold and help in a hospital or something. I mean, we've got too many archives. We've got too much art.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. I don't know if maybe we should start the questions, or some of the second generation of galleries that are in the room would like to make some comments about it. I'm not quite sure about time either. So, I don't know if there's questions or over there.
Hey guys, I just would like to know if any of you would be willing to tell a story or recount an incident where you and your parents had a substantial disagreement about the direction of the business and how you resolved it. You can just say no, I suppose.
Sorry, can you say it again?
I said I suppose you could just say no. But otherwise, can you talk about a point where maybe there was some tension between you and your parents about how to continue the business, and then how you guys worked through that to decide what to do?
I think when we really decided to, when I moved back to New York, we decided we were going to open up. We opened up a small office there, and that seemed to kind of satisfy Nicholas for a period, because we had a small staff and a physical presence and stuff. And I started looking for spaces, and they were very hard. It's very hard to find a good space in New York, and I found this very difficult space, which wasn't a space at all. It was a piece of dirt in Chelsea. It was nothing had ever been built on it. It was underneath the High Line and came with all kinds of complications. And that took a lot of convincing Nicholas to do that. It was a very major undertaking. It took a lot. It took, as all building projects do, they took double the amount of time, double the amount of money, everything. It was a pain in the ass. But eventually he got used to it. Those kind of things. I think when you go through a sort of seismic shift and you're really kind of changing gear, I think it's uncomfortable if you've been riding in the same gear for a long time. That I think for me is where it was the biggest source of tension, which is now past.
Well, I think the moving of a gallery or opening another gallery is an enormous undertaking, and I think it was a major thing when we moved from Tottenham Mews to Dering Street, and how we financed it. And we've never been a gallery that's been very wealthy in that we didn't start with money. My mother started as a secretary in a gallery and so on. So until perhaps I would say 2005 or so 2002, we always owed money to the bank, and it was quite a big jump to in 1990, just at the time of the 91 recession coming up, to move and spend what we thought was an awful lot of money at the time for making a new building, work, etc. But I think you have to do these things. You sense it's right, and in fact, it was the absolute right thing to do. And it will happen again, I imagine. But it was pretty scary at the time when the banks, as I'm sure many gallerists know, when the banks start calling and the checks in the post.
Yes.
Well, in my case, I have to introduce many new things. So I have so many discussions and fights and everything, but it always ended in a good way. And I also, my family, it's both from both sides came very modest. So every single new thing in the gallery for us was a fortune. For me, it was double also energy to convince to have like even new computers. So now everything is moving in the right direction, and sense that we are able to do many things. But we had so many fights at the beginning.
It's probably easier to fight with brothers and your family. No, you're used to
Yeah,
that
the end it
in the
was
beginning, so
yeah.
rather than with a business partner, that can become really struggling.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think there was another question. Georgina had one, and the lady over there.
Hi there, thank you. That was very interesting. Carlos, can I ask you a question? I just wondered, I was thinking about art fairs and how actually the churn of directors is quite rapid at art fairs. Do you think fairs would benefit from having this sort of longevity that we're talking about at galleries of their directors?
Well, I think it's an absolutely different business model. I mean, I don't think, fairs they have a character of their own, and there's a director that can bring some novelties or way of doing things, but the first stand besides the persons that run them. You know, I think I always say that ARCO is a public fair, and that has helped them to survive even in the very bad moments of the Spanish economy or the crisis in the art market. So in that sense, it's not a personal project, while galleries are personal projects, you know, and the relationship with the artist is very personal. The relationship with collectors is very, but for the art fairs, we have a system, and we have rules, and we have how to apply, and it's not a personal sympathy for one thing or the other that we do. Of course, I think the fact that one person runs an art fair or another person brings some changes, but the structure goes beyond persons, and I think that's very, very important, and it's completely different compared to galleries, where there's no art fair that says, so art fair by this person, no? So maybe they'll be in the future, but right now art fairs are beyond the directors.
Although the relationship with the galleries is hopefully
but it's
personal.
a different model, but I think I think most of the directors stay there for a while. I think it's an honor to be a director of an art fair, a prestigious art fair, but I think it's also good that it changes every some years. No? It's very natural, yes.
Thank you.
Georgina, you wanted a question?
For Guillermo, you said when you opened the gallery in Ibiza, you said it was very difficult. What do you define as difficult? Is it a question of sales, or is it a question of creating an audience? What do you do? What were those difficulties?
In the case of Ibiza, it's a very particular place, because everyone thinks that Ibiza is just a place for parties, but basically there is a tradition from let's say, from the 30s, that a lot of intellectuals from Central Europe used to be in the island. So it's a place that the parties are in a very tiny part of the island, the majority geographically of the island. There is always very, very interesting people. So I decided to open the gallery there because I wanted to try to preserve the identity, that intellectual identity. I used to go there when I was a kid, and I always found it very interesting on that side. And then this topic of the island, which everyone is talking about, I thought that it was very dangerous at the end for it. So to kind of keep it in a good, or let's say good speaking about the island. So the difficulties is that it's a place that my program is not easy at the end. So it's a conceptual program, and I decided to open the gallery in a place that basically is very difficult to reach. It's an old warehouse. It belongs to farmers in the middle of nowhere, no signs, difficult to get. Very big space, because I wanted to really be able to build up exhibitions that are not in the regular context of the gallery. So more like institutional shows. The difficulties, like there is not really like an audience or public that really goes there. So what I wanted to do is to create a place that people don't reject invitations to come. And also it's a place that is very spiritual. So people are feeling really treated equally. There is no hierarchies. It's a very interesting place, and it's still very difficult. So people think that is. I read an article today in the newspaper that is the more expensive place in the Mediterranean, and it's true, extremely expensive. But people are just, relaxing and not really. So you really have to make a double effort to bring the people into the gallery. But my ambition was to try to help to change the identity of the island. So when I opened the gallery, was nobody there, no galleries. Even the museum was not doing a really important program. Now, not because of me, but maybe I help a little bit. But there is a foundation that Lisson was participating last year in an exhibition with this foundation, which I think is fantastic. The idea of collaborating with international well-known galleries, so they bring in a really interesting audience and everything. And the most beautiful thing is that you are able to participate in a change. So we have a profession that is very difficult, is very demanding, but the real pleasure of this, to have a gallery at the end for myself, is to be happy and to work with your artists and have relationship with the artists directly, build up your own collectors, which is very interesting. We didn't really talk about this before, but it's probably the most important thing, is that create your own community and that they can follow you. And just to finish, I don't want to be long on this, but I decided also to open a gallery there. Even it's still difficult, but it's really nice to work from. I based in Ibiza for about 5 months, and I don't wear a jacket, or so I just have my swimming pants and flip-flops, and it's a really good way to do business. And
you
artists,
work a lot. I've seen that.
I work a lot. Artists love to come. I have also difficulties now because everyone wants to come. So my house became a hotel, and but I think it was one of the most bright things I ever did. I mean, especially for the gallery.
Maybe you'd like to do a question to the auditorium and pass the word to some of the second generation of galleries that are here, either Nerea or Patricia de Muga, if they want to share something about their experience or something we haven't said that you want to add. Nerea is the second generation of the Galería Nieves Fernández.
My case was very similar to Guillermo. So I had a lot of fights. It was not easy. It was not organic. And I decided to direct the gallery because it was a decision. It was not easy. But I guess it's also normal when people, as our parents, they build so much themselves, and then you start taking decisions. And I think for them it's pretty hard. And then they also left a very big inventory, which helped us. So I think there is a lot of weight, but it also helps on the other side. But it was not easy.
And I see Ursula behind you, which is the other case. She's passing the gallery to her son.
I'm still in the progress.
In the progress, in the delicate transition.
And it's quite difficult as well. I mean, it's very good. Thomas does mainly all the fairs. For this, it's perfect somehow because, but as soon as it goes further, we have really to have long discussions and so on. And because I intend really to speak to him and to have his yes, because otherwise, I think in future you can't have fights all the time. But I know that other colleagues, I don't want to tell their names, they have all difficulties until it's done. So I'm still in progress, I can say. So I don't know, where is somebody else?
I don't know if Patricia or Mayoral, someone wants to say something.
Yeah, I want to speak about difficulties. My father has a gallery for 45 years. He still has a gallery, Ronnie van der Velde. But we have also a brother and a sister, which makes it very difficult. And so 8 years ago, I went back to the gallery for my father. He asked me to come in because I was very ill, which I did. But we had a lot of difficulties. And some of them were, of course, there are a sister, a brother, and those things. But also the way he was working, he did a lot of secondary market. And I like, his slogan is, I like to work with artists who doesn't live anymore, because they doesn't argue. And I like to work with people. So we had a problem. So that's why I decided to do a step backwards and to have my own gallery. I think it's not easy to do that. It was really, really tough. And it was really, we were all very sad about it. Now it's very, very good. But I think if I hear about the stories here, it sounds great. But to be honest, it was really tough in our family. And 2 years ago, I invited my father as a curator, and we did a link between all our addresses. Because when I opened my gallery, I said, I don't want your collectors in the first, I don't want to send them an invitation. If they want to come later, they come because they like my program, but not because of you. And we did the link, and only 1/6 of all his collectors and my collectors were the same, which means we have a totally different kind of people we reach. So I think it's a richness for both of us. So I'm still working for my father. I sold this weekend 2 pieces for him. Good for him, good for me. So that's, I think, also a possibility, but it's never a love story, to be honest.
Well, we all have families and we know how it works. So thank you so much for being here today. I think now there's a break, or there's a break. Great. Coffee.
Exactly. Those who could not. Thank you all. Thank you, Alex, David, Guillermo, and Carlos. Thank you very much.